What Brendan Boland didn't know was that the institution in which he and his family held so much faith would in fact conspire to silence him. What age were you when this all started?
Well, when I was an old boy, I was 11 years old.
You were just 11?
Just 11, yeah.
And how long did it carry on for?
It carried on for over 2 years.
Smith, who abused for 4 decades, often took children on marathon excursions in his car up and down the island. Brendan remembers one particular trip to Dublin.
Got in the car and we went to Belfast and we picked up 2 children in Belfast. And then we drove from Belfast to Cavan. We picked a girl up in Cavan. We went to pick another boy up in Cavan. And then we went back to the bed and breakfast. And there was 2 bedrooms. There was one for the girls and one for Father Smith and the 2 boys.
That was you and another boy?
Me and another boy from Belfast. And he called me over first and he abused me the way he did before. And when he was finished with me, I went back to the bed and then he called the other boy over and done the same with him. And this time I was in the bed watching. Well, I was listening. I didn't want to watch.
It was a little afterwards, in 1975, that Brendan found the courage to tell a local priest about the abuse. The priest took him straight home to tell his parents. A week or so later, Brendan and his dad were driven to a local monastery. Brendan was led into a room with 3 priests, including Father John B. Brady, now Cardinal Brady, then a 36-year-old teacher, canon lawyer, and bishop's secretary. Brendan was to be questioned, alone. His father was told to stay outside.
I felt alone, scared. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what questions were going to ask me. I was only 14 years old at the time there.
And your father wasn't in there with you?
My father wasn't in there with me, no.
Cardinal Brady compiled the answers. Another priest asked the questions. Brendan was asked what Smith did, but also about his own behaviour. What did they ask you?
Did you ever do anything like this before with another boy or a man, grown man? And I said no, and they said, if not, why not? And they kept asking me, did my body change? Did I get an erection? They asked me then, did seed come from my body? And what kind of questions are they to ask a 14-year-old boy?
Brendan might have been shaken by the nature of the questions, but as the church's own transcript confirms, he was able to tell the priests the names and addresses of other children who Smith was abusing or who were at risk of abuse.
I gave them the names of the other children that were with me on the trips. There was a boy from Belfast. I gave him his name and address. There was a girl from Belfast. I gave him her name and address. There was a girl from Cavan. I gave him her name and address. There was another boy from Cavan. I gave him his name and address. And there was another boy that was his friend.
So were you able to be any more specific about abuse you had seen, you had witnessed?
Yeah, I told him that I witnessed one boy being abused. I told him that.
And who was that?
That was the boy from Belfast.
You told them that this boy had been abused?
I did, yes. Yep. I knew for a fact he was abused. And the other boy from Cavan, he told me he was abused because he didn't like going on the trips either.
The documents verify Brendan's account in black and white.
One of the priests came over, I'm not sure, with a Bible. And he made me put my hand on the Bible and say, I, Brendan Boland, do solemnly swear I have told the truth, the whole truth, and I will speak to no one about this meeting, only to authorised priests. And then I signed it, and the other signature on the document was Father John B. Brady, now Sean Brady, Cardinal of Ireland.
Cardinal Brady still had work to do. He himself conducted a second interview, this time with the Cavan boy Brendan had told him about. The child corroborated Brendan's account. He was sworn to secrecy. Again, Cardinal Brady countersigned the oath. He passed 2 reports to his bishop. The police were told nothing, ever. I've just spoken to the man who, as a 15-year-old boy, was also interviewed by Cardinal Sean Brady. And what he's told me is shocking. He says that his parents were told nothing about his involvement in this secret church investigation. More than that, he says his parents were not told that he was being abused by Father Brendan Smith. The church, of course, said nothing, and he said nothing to anyone, not a soul, because he was sworn to secrecy. I then traced Brendan's friend from Belfast, using the same address that the 14-year-old gave all those years ago.
I remember going up to Dublin with Brendan. I think there's about 5 or 6 of us on that trip. Brendan was a nice fella. He was probably as petrified as I was at the time, but and the things, you know, I just felt, in many ways, I felt very guilty too, you know, because I was sharing a room with this other boy, and Smith and his behaviour, and what he would maybe want us to do and want the way he wanted us to behave. It's unbearable to think about it sometimes, you know.
When I tell him that Cardinal Brady was told in 1975 that he was being abused, that his name is down on paper, he is horrified.
And then, as it transpired that Brendan had mentioned me and that my name and address was actually on these documents as well, it was just like, it's like a knife into your chest. It's like a sudden, sharp pain.
And the reason it hurt so much is that Father Brendan Smith continued to abuse him after 1975. Then his sister for another 7 years, and 4 cousins abused right up until 1988.
Nobody came to our house, or should have came to our house, and warned our family, or my parents, and said, look, this is what's happening, this man is involved in this, we would strictly advise you to keep him away from the house. Okay, maybe I had only another year's abuse to go, but my sister, you know, for years after that, she was abused. And then, lo and behold, cousins after that.
I have spoken to all those who Brendan Boland told the church about in 1975. 4 of the 5 children had been abused by Smith. 2 of them continued to be abused after that secret inquiry. All say that to the best of their knowledge, their families were not warned in any way about the paedophile.
Poor Brendan, actually thought, given this information, he was going to protect me, he was going to protect other people, and thinking this was going to be the end of it. And by God, it is far from the end.
Cardinal Brady's own career took off after 1975. First away to Rome, and then in 1997 made Primate of all Ireland, the senior Catholic in the country. By his own account, he never failed to protect any child.
If I found myself in the situation where I was aware that my failure to act had allowed or meant that other children were abused, well, then I think I would resign.
I'm writing what's called a right of reply letter to Cardinal Brady, telling him what we have discovered point by point. I want to know why he didn't make sure the children he'd been told about were protected. And I want to know why he and the church seemed to minimize his role when it is plain that he carried out the investigation into Smith. When limited news of the church investigation first broke 2 years ago, the church called him a note-taker. He said he was a notary without powers who did his job.
I insist again, I did act and acted effectively within that inquiry to produce the grounds for removing Father Smith from ministry, and specifically it was underlined that he was not to hear confessions, and that was very important.
The ban on Smith wasn't enforced. Here he is 4 years later at a special mass for the sick. And when Cardinal Brady says he was a notary, his role was in fact that of an investigator, according to his own handwritten note. I was dispatched to investigate the complaint. I needed to find a clear path through the archaic and often confusing world of canon law, the church law that Cardinal Brady was versed in and that he applied to this 1975 case. My guide is the Reverend Thomas Doyle, a world-renowned expert in the field.
He was the investigator. He was deputed to investigate, to lead the investigation, to make sure that it had taken place.
Not simply a note-taker.
No, not simply. That's minimizing what he actually was. He did take notes, but he also prepared the report, and he authenticated the report.
You know that Cardinal Brady insists that he did his job, that he passed the information he had up to his bishop. Did he do his job?
Just to say that I did my duty, I just followed orders, I passed it up the chain, is completely inadequate. I mean, if he didn't do it, he should have told the bishop that the other families need to be notified. If you won't do it, I will do it. You know, the man was not a robot. And these are human beings that he's dealing with here. And so the information was very clear. The testimony that Brendan apparently gave to them was very, very clear and detailed, as well as the names of the others. These are the ones we know about. Now, there could well have been a number of others that could have been prevented, but it was not prevented. That in itself is criminal behavior. Because the bishops, the priests, Brady, they knew that this man was an abuser of children. It wasn't that he was, as I said, slapping their wrists with a ruler in class. You know, he was sexually assaulting them. Nothing happened. Again, a cover-up.
Ultimately, all power in the Catholic Church resides in Rome, with the Pope, who appoints all the bishops, all the cardinals. This is one hierarchy which doesn't pretend to be anything else. Estimates vary, but so far the abuse scandals have cost the Church about £3 billion and counting. Much more vital damage has been done to its reputation and to its moral authority. This day, senior church figures from around the globe are gathering for a conference in Rome, looking at ways of rooting out child abuse. Cardinal Sean Brady heads a small Irish delegation. I've been told that even within the church, Cardinal Brady is seen as a gravely weakened leader. I don't expect to speak to him until he has had time to respond to my letter. But I do want to speak to this man, Monsignor Charles Scicluna. He is one of the most powerful officials in the Catholic Church, the chief prosecutor. Having examined 4,000 cases of clerical abuse, he says accountability and truth are the only way forward.